Perfect. Thank you. And also, just so everyone knows, the recording is only capturing us as the speakers and the presentation. So you all don't have to worry about it. So to get started, welcome everyone to our self-compassion and productivity workshop. I am Dana Ocampo. I am a graduate peer educator with Project Ocean. I am a master's student and I am currently pursuing my degree in student development and higher education. So yeah, really excited you're all here. Thank you for making time.
Yeah, and thanks, Dana, for starting us off here. I'm Brianna. I also go by Bree, and my pronouns are they, she, he, they. Oh, cool. We have another person from Ocean actually joining us right now. And I am currently in my 4th year. I actually just recently transferred here to LB, and I'm in the design department. So I'm hoping to pursue industrial design. I'm really happy that y'all were able to make it here today, and I can't wait to get started.
So we're going to go over our agenda. The first one being things about, so what is time deficit and recognizing the effects of feeling rushed all the time. I don't know if you all felt this. I felt this especially this week with transitioning back to campus, but feeling like you're going to go and have a place to be or something else to do. And sometimes that can take a big toll on your mental health. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to talk about strategizing. What's the game plan to actually deal with time deficit and the feeling the need to be productive all the time. We're going to talk about methods, like what tools are there out there that can help you with your journey of managing both productivity and self-compassion. And then our 4th one is going to be talking about a discussion on what it means to be lazy and how it can feel sometimes that we are lazy or that we get that idea when we ever take a moment to pause or rest, but also recognizing that rest is really important. So we're just gonna have a larger discussion on that. So that's basically the way we're gonna head out today. So the first thing that I do wanna talk about is time scarcity. 80% of people experience time scarcity, feeling as though they do not have enough time to accomplish everything they want to do in the day. If this resonates for you, go ahead and just drop an emoji. I know it does for me. Definitely feeling like there's always something else to do. But it shows that, for example, in things such as the Good Samaritan experiment, where basically there was an experiment where they were having people who were going to be entering the clergy. And then specifically, they were going to give a sermon on what it means to be a good Samaritan, what it means to stop what you're doing in order to help another person. And in that experiment, they found that if the researchers said, you have to go across campus to give this sermon and you have plenty of time to get there, or another group was told, you have to go and give this sermon, but you might feel a little rushed because we were running a little late. So you should hurry up on your way. What they found is, even though they were literally thinking about how to basically how to give this explanation to other people about how to stop and help others, they found that if people felt that they were running late, they were actually less likely to stop on their way to the sermon to help someone who was injured on their way to the location they were going to give the sermon. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so basically it was a sense that in that time, if you are feeling rushed or you feel like you have to go somewhere and go all the time, you won't be able to really help out and reach others. So there's thinking about something called time confetti, which is time for tiny tasks. So the idea is if you have 5 minutes before a meeting because it finishes earlier, 10 minutes after finishing lunch, using those tiny little time confetti for tiny things like, oh, I have to send a text to this person. Oh, I'm going to send one email, and then being able to be a little bit more strategic about that. But figuring out how to make sense of like the little bits of extra time that we have to give to others and also be a little kinder to ourselves. Also, a warning, you are not as good at multitasking as you think you are. So this is coming from another study where basically, I don't know if anyone else does this, but the idea of sometimes you are going to say, oh, I'm going to listen to this video that I need to listen to for class while at the same time taking notes on this other thing. And the idea that maybe you can read and listen at the exact same time. or if you are trying to do something else where it's sort of like you're going to focus on two different things. It turns out that even if you think you are very good at multitasking, the research shows that you're probably not as good at it as you think you are. In fact, it shows that if you are more likely to multitask over longer periods of time, it'll actually be a little bit more difficult for you to be able to focus on anything. There are certain things where, for example, if you take a break and try to send a really quick text because you see a notification at the same time you're studying, the break you took to answer that text will actually slow you down because it takes the brain a little bit longer to switch from one task to the other and give it its full attention. So it might be better to, for example, silence your phone and not get notifications for your study duration, because sometimes it might just break your groove if you are taking the time to even see the notification. And that can be hard, especially in this day and age where we're getting notifications for everything all the time. But that's just a warning and a little bit of advice. Yeah. So when we think about ways that we can manage this, you can think about like your learning style. Do you do digital or analog? So do you like having apps and journals and having everything on your phone? Or do you prefer having something on paper, something that you can write down? Like I do a little bit of both, and we're going to cover a lot of different options. But for me, I also bullet journal along with everything else that I do, even though I do have some things on my phone to give me reminders if I might not even remember to put it in my bullet journal. Also thinking about like, how often do you want to be able to think about what your plans are? Do you want to do it daily, weekly, monthly? In terms of like, how often do you want to look at your planner and be able to get reminded of what you have to do next? I know for me, sometimes I'll put things in months in advance just so that I can have that date down, because there's a good chance that if I like book tickets or something for like a concert or something, I might not even remember that I bought those tickets until like much closer. But it might be better to have it down somewhere so that when you get to that month, you go, oh, I should start preparing and thinking about, do I need to adjust my work hours so I can get there in time? Because, traffic is a thing again. But yeah, also know that you can personalize it and adapt it. Your style will grow and change. When I was an undergrad, actually, almost everything was digital. But then I've come to realize that the practice of writing things down and customizing it for me is actually much more helpful. And that's why I've switched a little bit more to bullet journaling, for example. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dana, so much for breaking that down for us. Honestly, I think for me, what I realized too is that sometimes it doesn't have to be so concrete in what style you choose. You can kind of mix it up a little bit for whatever ends up working for you. And now that we went into that, I'm also going to start kind of introducing some methods that we found work for some people. I do want to definitely say that sometimes like these methods might not work for you, and that's like totally okay. Make sure that like in that process that you're trying something out, and let's say like you get into one of these organizational styles and you kind of just find out it doesn't really work. You can't really find that it helps to keep you on track and accomplish the things you want to accomplish. It's totally okay to respect that and maybe find something that works a little bit better for you. So without further ado, I want to introduce calendar blocking to y'all. So actually, I was just talking about this with my friend, and they were saying that their roommate does calendar blocking. And what that is basically is going into any sort of calendar system. So that could be like Outlook, it could be Google Calendar, and just setting in certain time blocks that fit into each day. And you could include events like classes you have for that day. Maybe sometimes you have a certain workout schedule, you can include that as well. You could also put in things like certain events that you want to attend or certain workshops. And for me, I know that whenever I have a virtual meeting and it has a specific Zoom link, I love putting that in Google Calendar. It makes it so easy for me. But for calendar blocking, this would basically mean something maybe really extensive. It doesn't have to be super extensive though. It could be something a little bit smaller, and you could just reserve maybe certain aspects of your life to be in a calendar block, but not all of them. But if you were to do calendar blocking and you really took the steps to kind of really plan out your day, something we really like to recommend, and I'm so glad that Dana introduced this to me for the first time a while ago, was scheduling in time to rest. I know that it can be kind of difficult to know when to give a break in a certain area. And for various reasons too, I think especially for me, I know that I struggle to acknowledge and respect when I need a break and when I need to rest. Um, Taking breaks and taking a rest, I really want to emphasize this, is so important to just maintaining yourself and making sure that you're not getting burnt out in the process of trying to go through your day. So making sure that you're able to put yourself first, and like the title of this workshop is self-compassion and productivity, knowing how to fit those two together, being able to take care of yourself and also accomplish certain things that you want to do. And another tip for calendar blocking is putting in extra time for a task that you think will take, let's say, I'll give an example. So let's say you wanted to do an essay and you think that it only need 2 hours. If you took this little tip, if you added in an hour to that, so making it not just 2 hours, but 3 hours for your essay writing, then you could be able to feel a little bit more flexible, to step in when you're more comfortable, when you've really like settled in. I know for me as well, I recognize that when I step into class, it kind of takes a little while for me to like settle in. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. And feel free to like add that in the chat, or feel free to react as I say some of these things. But I recognize that like 10 to 20 minutes is usually my regular kind of adjustment period before I really feel like I'm in class, I'm focused, I actually have my stuff down, and I'm ready to engage. So for me, I think this tip is really great to be able to feel that you have that flexibility and you're not short on time, but you actually maybe have more time than you thought. So the second one, and personally, this is a favorite of mine, the to-do list. I actually ended up talking with a counselor, and this was maybe a year ago, I believe, at this point, but we ended up discussing ways to be able to organize things in a way that was doable for me and that I could find would be something I could take action on. So something that helped me actually was just to-do lists. I also use analog planners, just like Dana was mentioning too. And I noticed that being able to write those things down, crossing them out, being able to add on to it or rescheduling it for another day on the physical planner as like a to-do list has really helped me to kind of hone in on my day and feel like I can take on it, all of it, reasonably. So some of the tips we have for to-do lists are not putting in more than 8 items in one day. So I can guess, all of us here as students, we probably have a lot of things that we're juggling, of different responsibilities, personal ones, academic, work-related responsibilities, just so many things that we're trying to do in one day. And trying to follow this tip here helps to reinforce that there's really only so much we can do in one day, and there's really only so much energy that one person has. And knowing yourself, at least, being able to gauge that energy and putting down tasks that you feel like you can have time for can really be beneficial. And you can extend that compassion, that self-compassion to yourself as you try to just go through your day and still do the things that you want to do. I know for me, at least, I really took this particular advice to heart. And now when I write out my stuff in my agenda, I really try not to overwhelm it that much. But also in the process, if you end up not getting to a certain thing that you really wanted to get to, just acknowledge that, maybe that should be okay, and that you can always come back to things later and not feeling any source of like shame if you don't get to something. So another thing too that I wanted to mention is that there's templates too that you can use. And I've seen people use Notion. People get really into doing to-do lists sometimes. And perhaps this could be your little calling too. So there's Notion, there's doing analog planners. Some people have little PDF ones that you can fill in yourself. But there really are quite a few options too. So some of the things to consider when you're doing your to-do list is there's different ways that you can actually format it as well. For me, maybe the first thought that comes to my mind for a to-do list is that it's chronological, and then that's kind of the end of the story. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, there could be different ways to build your to-do list to work with the way that you know how you work. So some of the methods we've included here are putting the hardest work first so that you could like coast through the rest of the day. I know that Dana has on different occasions told me that that's something that they enjoy doing. But yeah, I just got something in the chat saying that I enjoy my happy planner, keeps me sane. You know, I have to agree with that. I think that my planner kind of grounds me and it kind of sets me up. I think without it, sometimes I feel a little bit lost or sometimes I feel confused. So I'm glad that having that planner brought that sense of kind of peace for you. And so another way to approach the to-do list is to putting priorities first. And so you could put something that's really urgent, making sure that that's on the top of your list to do so that once you finish that, you can either have a sense of relief about it. You could perhaps be able to get over with that certain task that you really need to accomplish, and then being able to address other things in the day, maybe knowing also your energy levels too. If you know that you have high energy levels in the earlier part of the day, then you can always put those tasks at that part of the day. Or if you have higher energy levels, let's say in the afternoon or something, you could also kind of situate things there. So just being able to really listen to your body, just recognizing the way that you work can really help you to build and plan certain things that you want to do in a way that's not really in conflict with you.
Right. So bringing us a little bit back to digital help, right? The idea that sometimes memory can be a finicky thing. So it's good to think about maybe having a centralized calendar. There are a couple: Google Calendar, Outlook we all have access to as CSULB students. And the nice thing about Outlook Calendar is also you can set up recurring meetings. You can put the Zoom link right in, and you can also invite other people via the system, right? Another thing that you can do in terms of reminders of making your phone do the work of memory for you, so that way you can clear up a little bit more brain space. The above apps can also send notifications, so that way you won't miss a meeting because it's right there on your calendar, or you know when you're going to be checking in at work or something. If you work at multiple different sites, I know that I experienced that as a grad student, and it's nice to get an exact reminder exactly where I'm supposed to be at any given moment. Sometimes I also remind myself, like when I need to start driving to campus. That's also something new with transition back to in-person. Giving myself the reminder that I need to check my commute now because I live a little bit further away. Recurring tasks. So the idea of if you have weekly meetings, but other important things like monthly, like if you're paying bills and you have to make your credit card bill payment, just so that way you never miss it. There's other things like discussion board assignments. So if you're in a new class for the semester and you are constantly having to do a discussion board, that is also something that you can put in a reminder for, so that you're not suddenly going, oh, right, I have to do that right before class. There's also a recommendation of different database apps that I do like enjoy using. Trello is an example of one. Trello is one that's basically a bunch of little boards that you can make. Notion is also highly customizable, and it is something where you can adjust the databases. We can go and do a walkthrough if we have time, if anyone has questions later, but those ones are really helpful in terms of having everything in one place. I know for me, I'm writing my thesis. Everything goes into my Notion because it's so nice and easy to look at. Those are little bits of digital help that I do recommend to students, just because it can be a really big lifesaver to not have to go through multiple different apps in order to sort of organize your whole life. Other habit building techniques that I do want to bring up. Oh yes, and Slack is another one, as Bree mentioned. Other habit building techniques. So one comes from Atomic Habits, which is also the name of the book by the author Clear. It's the idea of starting habits with like the smallest possible increment based on a ritual, and then you celebrate your activity. It's the idea that your emotions are just as important to habit building as the actual act of doing the habit, because no one builds a habit because of, sometimes they build it out of necessity, but it's not sticky and it doesn't stick until you feel good about that habit you are building. So for example, if you want to start a reading habit, do something where you can't make an excuse not to do it. You can read a sentence a day, and that still counts because you still read something. So it's the idea of the ritual. So for example, when you're eating breakfast, you pick up a book and you read one sentence, and then you feel good about it because that's one more sentence than if you didn't. And then afterward, you'll find that if you have more time, you can normally get as far as reading a paragraph, a page, a chapter. But it's the idea of, to build that habit, you need to feel good about it. Otherwise, if you make yourself feel bad about something, you're much less likely to actually go and do it. The other thing that I recommend is temptation bundling. Putting things you don't like doing with things that you do, but limit yourself to only doing those two things together in a pair. So there was another research study where basically they had people go who wanted to build an exercise habit. However, when they were going to the gym, they were given an iPad, or no, it was an iPod. Like, it was some real old thing where they loaded it up with audiobooks that they wanted to listen to. However, they could only listen to those audiobooks at the gym. They left it in the locker, and then they couldn't listen to those audiobooks otherwise. However, the people who agreed to this, where they could only listen to the audiobooks they wanted to listen to while they were exercising, they were more likely to build a stickier habit of going and building an exercise routine, because that's the only way they could really enjoy something. There was another example where I've heard where like someone will only burn candles that they really like when they are studying. So that way they associate the act of studying with being able to enjoy a nice candle. I know for me, since I wanted to start an exercise habit and I really love going to the beach, I don't let myself go to the beach unless I'm getting a good jog in or a good walk. You know, just something where you can put those two things together, and you are more likely to build a good habit from it. And then the other technique that is recommended is the idea of impactful starts. Habits started on like important dates or like big lifestyle shifts are more likely to start and stick. So this includes big ones, for example, New Year's resolutions, super popular, but also some things where if it's the first day of spring, or if it's a new semester, or even as something as simple as like, on this Monday, I am going to start this new habit. It is more likely to stick if you are going to pick a very like a date like that that is sort of associated with new beginnings and new starts. So yeah, those are all backed by research. I have my citations at the end of this, in case you get curious about the reasoning why. But it's sort of the idea that our emotions and how we feel build a lot more into our habits and the things we want to do than we realize. So that can be really good in terms of figuring out how do you get yourself to do something that you want to do, and sort of trick your mind into it. Because honestly, there's a lot going on right now, and it makes sense if you don't want to do anything. However, if there's something that you feel pushed to do, I hope that you achieve it. And these are some ways that you can maybe think about trying to do so.
Well, thank you again, Dana. That was great. I am honestly taking all of these little tips and I'm writing them down as you spoke. But I also wanted to introduce this article I came across recently, and I thought it really applied to our theme of self-compassion and productivity. I know that there's, I think, a general understanding in society of laziness, and seeing that if someone is not doing something, then they are lazy, and then seeing that as a bad thing. So when I read this article, the author Devin Price, and the title right there is at the bottom, Laziness Does Not Exist, in case you want to check it out. It's an article on Medium, and I love Medium a lot, just a little plug in. But the author Devin Price talks about how, as a professor, they were able to get a perspective on people's perception of students and procrastination, and seeing why are these students not doing certain assignments and what's holding them back. Is it laziness? Is laziness even an accurate word for this procrastination? And so they go into this article, and they really reframe the shame that some people might have around not being able to do something. And they really emphasized the importance of recognizing unique barriers, setbacks, or something that's really holding someone from running to accomplish something. So in these next two slides, I picked a few little quotes that I thought were just super great, but something that really helped me when I read this article was this little excerpt right here. And basically, it says that procrastination is a functioning problem. It is not a consequence of laziness. So what happens to someone when they are going through a quote procrastination is either they feel some anxiety about not being able to reach a standard that maybe they set for themselves, that maybe someone else sets up for them, or maybe for something that they perceive to be a certain expectation or standard of them, or maybe they're confused about where to start. So this really helped me because honestly, I still struggle with this. I think that in our society, especially, there is definitely a emphasis on being able to do as much as you can and always being productive, always being on the go, 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 without necessarily taking breaks in that. But of course, as we're all here in the workshop, we definitely wanted to open up that dialogue and express with you all that procrastination or not being able to start something can more likely be pointed to the kind of value that you put into something and making sure that you want to do that right, or maybe not being sure of where to start. So this is really something that resonated with me, and I hope resonates with you too. But as I go on and talk about the next quotes too, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. We'll be going into this a little bit more and having a little bit more discussion as well. And so this is another quote that I really took to, and the bolded phrase here, my favorite, people do not choose to fail or disappoint. So that was really eye-opening, honestly, for me to hear. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that phrase, but I think that this really gives me a certain reassurance about myself. And I'm not sure if it gives a reassurance about yourself too, but I also would like to believe this as well, that we want to do our best. You know, we want to be able to accomplish certain things or be able to show up for people and show up for ourselves. And I think that in general, this really helped me to see that, you know, there's always a context to what might be perceived initially as laziness. There's maybe a certain barrier that someone faces. And I think this reminded me not only to be kinder and more considerate about viewing other people, but just being kinder to myself as well, and making sure to be more caring to myself and really valuing anything that I'm going through and trying to be able to get the support that I need to get through it. So now that we've given you these two quotes, this is a question that we have for everyone. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the chat, and you could also feel free to unmute yourself too, but please share with us what prompts you to procrastinate. And do you have any feelings that you associate with that as well? Um, in the process of thinking about your answer, feel free to maybe identify any personal barriers. For example, in the first quote that I was mentioning, it mentions having a possible anxiety about starting something. So if you deal with anything similar to that, address that as well. But I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
I can chime in.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for this wonderful talk. My name is Mir. I'm a grad student at Long Beach, and procrastination is one of my traits. It's something that I've lived with for a very long time. And what prompts you to procrastinate? Definitely habit. I've always felt that some of my best work is done in the last minute. I'm not gonna lie. There's papers that I've done in the last couple of hours, and I've gotten wonderful grades on them. But definitely habit. Old habits are hard to break. And then what feelings do you associate with it? It's funny because I feel like there's this undue stress lingering in the background whenever I have assignments due or work projects due. And I don't know if it's the stress that drives me towards excellence. And so maybe that's why I do it subconsciously. But I often think to myself, wow, why didn't I just do it now so that I could enjoy all that time in between the deadline? So I'll use an example to put it into perspective. We have an assignment given to us prior to spring break. I could easily dedicate 2-3 days to it, get it out of the way, and enjoy my spring break. But much rather, I would go through the entire spring break, wait till I come back, and then focus on it. Meanwhile, that stress throughout the spring break is lingering in the background, knowing I have this paper waiting for me. So, yeah, those are the feelings I associate with it. And I believe, Bree, you mentioned laziness. And I feel that society always has this undue pressure that they exert by using words like productivity and, are you being productive? It's almost a passive aggressive way of saying, you're being lazy. Are you being productive? And so I think it's built into our society, whether it's in the workplace or within education. And so that's what this question sparked.
Wow, Mir, thank you so much for sharing. That was really great. I I really relate to your answer about that underlying stress that sort of continues for you until you end up getting to the assignment. I think that that's something that I haven't really like verbalized myself, but have definitely felt is just having that maybe frustration with myself, maybe disappointment in myself as well for not being able to get something started and then have that continue and build up. And so I think that that's really significant in this conversation about what prompts someone or what feelings are maybe associated with procrastination. But thank you so much for sharing. That was really great. And I see so many more comments here in the chat. This is great. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing to this. I really am enjoying this. But yeah, let me go ahead and get started. So Alice was talking about feeling that the task is too difficult to complete. Definitely. I think that with any task that might seem too big, if it's not broken down, at least for me, I also feel maybe a sense of overwhelmed by something. So I'm so glad that you addressed that. And for Megan, Megan was mentioning when I have too much to complete and not knowing where to start. I definitely know how that can get. I think especially as students too, so many tasks can build up at once. And sometimes when we don't necessarily have the tools to be able to compartmentalize perhaps where certain things can go and knowing maybe how much priority we can give to it, it can definitely become very overwhelming. And I do find myself in that situation a lot. For you, Megan, I'm not sure if you want to follow up, but are there any feelings that you associate with having that? I know that I mentioned overwhelm, but please feel free to share. And last but not least, I do see that Commissioner Martinez also wrote that they think that just thinking that they have more time and trying to balance school, work, children, and family and figuring out what is more important. Definitely. I think being able to prioritize between so many different aspects of your life can really, it can be a lot for someone to undertake. And especially in a situation maybe where you might not know who to go to if you need that extra support, can definitely put a lot on someone. Dana, do you have any extra thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I see that Megan also added that feeling overwhelming and kind of burdened with work. And yeah, I resonate to all of this. And I think for me, like when I tend to procrastinate, I feel a little afraid. Like genuinely, I think the feeling is fear. And I think it's because like as a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist, I'm trying really hard. I tend to set really high standards for myself. So I have that feeling where it's like sometimes it's too difficult to complete because I want it to be the greatest thing it possibly can be. I want it to be impressive or exceptional and all of these things. And I think I'm afraid that therefore the amount of work that I put into it will just not match up to the expectations I put in my head. And it's typically associated where procrastination is typically a thing that perfectionists do, because if you give yourself less time to do something, it typically is a form of self-sabotage. So that way, if things don't go well, then you can say, oh, I didn't have enough time, you know, even if you set yourself up for it. And that's something when I first heard it, I was like, oh my God, I feel attacked. Because that way it's sort of like, if it turns out really great, even if you do have a little less time, then that's just, it feels even better. But then that way your ego is sort of like protected if it doesn't go well. So yeah, I do associate these feelings of fear. But that said, I hear a lot of what you're saying, and I feel like the sense of like, sometimes something can be too difficult to complete. And I just want to acknowledge that like everyone who is here, who is currently going to school in the middle of a pandemic, you are perfectly fine as you are. And when we are doing this workshop, we're trying to give you tools so that life can be a little bit easier, because who wouldn't want life to be easier considering everything we're going through? But as you are perfectly fine. You're more than fine. And there's nothing that you need to do that like requires change to be better for any reason. But it's sort of just like, how do you sort of wrangle these feelings and emotions that come with a society that expects you to be productive, as Mir says, because the implication is if you're not productive, then who you are in your like neutral state is not good enough. And that's not what we want to say. We want to say that you are good enough as you are. And just a reminder to everyone. But yeah.
Always love the words of wisdom from Dana. I would definitely love to echo what Dana was saying, but yes, everyone, please remember in this process, you know, that you have worth as yourself. And a lot of these messages that you might hear about laziness, about procrastination, you know yourself best, you know, and you know how much energy you have. And just once again, repeating what was stated in the laziness does not exist article is just that people just don't choose to fail or disappoint. So just being able to hold yourself with that note going forward. But thank you so much to everyone who shared with their experiences. This was really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. If you have any additional feelings, feel free to put them in the chat. We'd love to keep the discussion going. But just to respect all of your time, we're going to start moving into sort of like the wrapping up. You're all going to get an email from us. Basically, this is just a phone wallpaper scheduler. It's fitted to iPhones. You can go ahead and just make it on Canva. But basically, it's so that you can put your schedule on your wallpaper, so it's always there for you to see. I just see that as a little hack that people use. Yeah, this is my schedule. I don't calendar block because I like having free space. However, it is just a nice, easy reference on exactly like where everything is and when I need to be in certain places. Yeah. So yeah, I recommend that. Feel free to share it with your friends, but this is just a little thing that we wanted to leave you with so you could use it. Recommendations, you're going to get this in the PDF form of this presentation, but these are all clickable links for basically a bunch of either podcasts that Bree and I listened to that talked about this, the idea of managing self-compassion in a culture that expects productivity, but also just book recommendations, things like that. And then we have our references page. And then that's about it. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. Any other thoughts, Bree?
I think you covered it all. Yeah. I think one last thing that I'd love to offer is that going forward as Project Ocean, we always love to create different events, different workshops that help to just work on ourselves. And so for me, at least, I was going to offer to everyone, if you ever have any ideas about a certain time management thing that you want to try out and you maybe want to share it with Project Ocean, we'd love to share different students' experiences, different faculty as well, because I do recognize too that we might have some faculty with us today. And just being able to share everyone's little progress, because I think that one of the amazing benefits of mental health awareness is community and sharing other people's experiences, ideas, and what they're going through. I know for me, seeing what other people are doing are really so vital to inspire me to do certain things too. So I just wanted to open that up to everyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. Bree and I will stick around in the room if anyone has any questions or wants to chat, but thank you all.